I'm Katherine Johnson, 55 years old. I'm a divorced wedding planner who ended my marriage 10 years ago. Before the divorce, my husband and daughter consistently ignored me for 5 years. Once my daughter graduated from college and became independent, I decided to leave my husband. Even though I felt ignored, I stayed to raise my daughter until she finished college. After the divorce, I left the house with my son. It's been 10 years since the divorce, and at that time, my son had just started high school. Reflecting on those days still brings a sharp pain to my heart. But by living each day fully, the pain has gradually faded. Recently, a name I hadn't seen in a decade popped up on my phone. "Hello, you still sound as dreary as ever." A voice filled with disdain responded. It was my ex-husband. After all this time, I wondered why he wanted to talk. I kept my response minimal, saying, "I'm at work right now." "Wow, you're working? Lucky someone actually hired you." My ex-husband always looked down on me. Perhaps it was his need to feel superior. In reality, he never contributed financially, dealing with gambling and debts while I worked to support us. Remembering this makes my blood boil. Though I wanted to hang up immediately, the fact that he reached out after 10 years suggested there might be something important. Suppressing my emotions, I continued the conversation. "What do you want?" I didn't want to raise my voice while working. Remaining calm and concise, he then delved into his own needs. "Mur is getting married. It'll look bad without a mother. Come back just for that." This was so typical of my ex-husband, solely concerned about appearances. Even after a decade, he still prioritized such superficial things, trying to involve his ex-wife. Despite everything, I, now 32, still consider Mur my daughter. I've never stopped caring about her, even during the 7 years of being ignored. However, considering our history, I couldn't simply agree to his request on his terms. I couldn't help but hesitate to meet the owner of this voice I hadn't heard in a while. "Does she agree to this?" he asked, as if it's the most natural thing. What kind of person demands this as if it doesn't matter? What agree to what? Does she agree to have her ignored and divorced ex-wife attend their wedding? Does this man really not understand? His response clarified everything. "Can't you just listen to me? A divorced couple attending their daughter's wedding sounds quite good, doesn't it?" He was still fixated on appearances. To him, a former couple attending an event together was probably nothing out of the ordinary. As I calmly considered this, he dealt another blow. "You must be working as a regular employee by now, right? Well, during our marriage, I supported you financially. It's only fair you contribute to Mur's wedding expenses." What I recalled was working part-time and then as a full-time employee. I have achieved an even higher position now. Back then, it wasn't for a comfortable life. It was the result of me working to earn a living that I couldn't afford. And of course, I have no recollection of having to pay for it. I don't mean to complain now, but I can't even express how much his memories are being altered for his convenience. Discuss the money directly with me. I'm busy too. It all came down to public image and money for him. Even now, these conversations bring back painful memories. Shortly after we got married, I found out about my ex-husband's love for gambling. He earned a salary, but it never made its way home. Debts kept piling up without my knowledge. While I worked hard to support our family and raise our kids, he accused me, "All you care about is money. You don't care about me." He started coming home speaking of perfume, not bothering to hide or make excuses for his affairs. It seemed like cheating was just inevitable for him. It's all in the past now, not a pleasant memory, but I try to move on. Attempting to change the subject, I take a deep breath and ask him over the phone, "What does Murray say?" "What? You're still being ignored by Murray, continually neglected by your own daughter. That's pathetic," he mocks, laughing as if he finds pleasure in this. Talking to this man wouldn't lead to anything productive. "I'll talk to her directly," I assert. "You should. I hope Mur talks to you normally," he replies with a snicker and abruptly ends the call. I let out a deep sigh and turn my phone back on. On the day, I arrive early at the waiting room and sit down alone. Suddenly, the door opens, and I hear footsteps. I'd recognize them even after 10 years. They stop right in front of me. Why are you sitting here? What? There's no place for a mother who abandoned her child. His unnecessarily loud voice echoes in the small room. What do you mean? You heard it from Murray, didn't you? What? There's no seat for a mother who hasn't properly talked to her daughter for 17 years. You're not wanted here. His words spit out with a triumphant laugh are predictable. I can imagine his expression without even looking. He must be picturing a mother rejected by her daughter after hinting at a joint appearance by the divorced couple over a phone call after 10 years. Such a typical move of his. Unaware that I'm thinking this, he continues his verbal attack. But inside, I can't stop laughing. Suppressing my emotions, I respond solemnly. I was just so curious. What? You're curious about your daughter's wedding after being ignored for 7 years and out of touch for 10, he says, laughing. Man, are you some kind of masochist? I paid some money, so let me have a peek. No way, Mary doesn't care about you at all. You're just a wallet. He laughs uncontrollably, holding his stomach amidst his laughter. After a while, there's a soft knock. My ex-husband responds gruffly, and 2 figures slide into the room. Mur and my son Ethan. My ex-husband, looking puzzled, addresses them. Mary, why are you dressed like that? Mary, who should have been dressed as a bride, is wearing a regular dress. Ethan, too, is casually dressed in a jacket and pants. And there I am in my plain pantsuit, looking baffled. My ex-husband asks Mur with a blank expression the same question again. Mur casually replies, What are you talking about? My wedding's already over. What? The wedding's over? Yes. What do you mean it's over? I don't understand. It's over means it's over, just like that, right, Mom? Mur says, smiling at me. Ethan and I return her smile. My ex-husband looks at us as if he can't believe what he's seeing. Hey, what do you mean it's over? Do you know something about this? He demands, turning to me. It's just as Mur said, I reply. Like I said before, the 3 of us and the other family had the ceremony in Hawaii without you. Mur calmly explains the main points to her father, his voice rising an octave in his flustered state. What, Hawaii? Mom helped us out. You didn't contribute a penny. Why would we want someone like you at the wedding? Of course, we wanted Mom there, Mur added, stunning her father. My ex-husband, desperate, asked, Then what's this today? Why are we all gathered in the wedding venue's waiting room? Mur's eyes flickered as she looked at her father, then coldly said, It's to cut ties with you. My ex-husband trembled slightly as he spoke. What do you mean by cutting ties with me? You ignored her, with me, for 7 years, and then she left us. Clearly not expecting such treatment from his daughter, whom he thought was on his side. He was visibly shocked, but Mur was relentless. What? You didn't just ignore Mom. You ignored me and Ethan too. What? I wasn't ignoring Mom with you. I find it disgusting to be associated with a man who ignored his family, had an affair, and had a child out of wedlock. My ex-husband gasped at Mur's words. He stared at her, his expression blank in the dead silence. Mur continued, The reason I didn't talk to Mom was to keep an eye on you. What? You neglected your family for gambling and debts, had an affair, even had a love child. And you hit Mom behind our backs, didn't you? What? You thought we didn't notice? Any middle schooler would understand that. And when Ethan and I were nice to Mom, you hit her even more, didn't you? My ex-husband glared at me. I didn't do anything. It was you who didn't bother to hide your actions even in front of the kids. He must have believed I turned my children against him, but I never did. I was cautious, as any action on my part could have negatively impacted the children. I refrained from confiding in anyone about his actions to prevent unintended consequences. Looking back, perhaps I should have discreetly sought help. But at that time, I was overwhelmed. I thought enduring it would be sufficient. However, my children didn't accept that. Each, in their own way, wanted to help and became involved. I knew you were abusing Mom since I was in elementary school. What? Since then? You might have thought we were asleep, but your loud yelling woke us up, whether we liked it or not. But as an elementary or middle schooler, there was nothing I could do. So I decided, once I was in high school, I'd save Mom. I ignored Mom to keep an eye on you. I thought if you had an ally, you wouldn't dare hit Mom. So to protect Mom, I decided not to talk to her. She knows that. What she knows? It was a strategy we all came up with. He hadn't expected us to be in cahoots. His face turned pale and twisted. I wonder what my children are thinking. Ignoring that, Mer continued. I pretended to be on Dad's side to keep him in a good mood for safety. In exchange, I made sure Ethan was always with Mom in case you tried to hit her. Ethan, being a boy, could protect her. What? Ethan was just an elementary or middle schooler back then. He couldn't have stopped me. My ex-husband's words made me chuckle. What are you laughing at? Nothing, just contempt, disgust. Thinking about how you're always bluffing. See, you always get worked up so easily. You were always afraid of Ethan, right? Because he could see through you and shut you down with his words, even when he was little. What? I knew you avoided Ethan as much as possible. You were running away from him, even though he was just a kid, because he was smart. My ex-husband blushed in embarrassment and clammed up. That's why I stayed by your side, and Ethan stayed with Mom. That way, you'd never dare lay a hand on her. I never realized that. He was visibly shocked. Murray spoke bluntly to him. Well, of course. What? You became more and more of a stranger, finding your place elsewhere. You were so oblivious. You didn't even see your own family, did you? Remembering that time doesn't hurt me anymore. But Mur's words started to blur my vision. Ethan gently touched my shoulder and continued, Dad, what about what we talked about earlier? The affair and having a child. You're not denying it, huh? Well, even if you denied it, it's the truth, and there's nothing you can do about it now. Why are you bringing this up? My ex-husband could only give a vague response to Ethan's unexpected turn in the conversation. Ethan pressed on. Did you know I was working a part-time job in high school? Part-time job? You didn't know, huh? Mur was working part-time too. What? Dad was never home, never put money into the household, just messing around. We both had to work part-time in high school to help Mom. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. As I said earlier, you never really saw us or Mom, so you didn't notice that Mur was fooling you. My ex-husband fell silent at Ethan's words, and I worked in the kitchen of a restaurant, you know? You used to come there a lot with a woman. What? Sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. You brought a little kid with you too, right? What? That's your love child, isn't it? What? You'd loudly say things like, this kid's going to grow up to be handsome like me and stuff. It was so embarrassing. No, nobody wants to be like you. Ethan snorted. He had no idea his son had seen him cheating and even seen his love child. My ex-husband started sweating and breathing shallowly while glancing at him. I casually asked, how are May and Ken doing? I threw out names he probably didn't expect me to know. And he gasped, how did you? How do you want to know? After we divorced, it might not have been a big deal for you, but I had to go through a lot of paperwork. It's impossible not to notice, especially since you acknowledged them. My ex-husband was silent again. I didn't feel disappointed anymore, but I wondered if he thought he could hide it by keeping quiet. Eventually, when he's gone, all sorts of issues will fall on the children due to inheritance. Regardless of the divorce, the children are still related to him by blood, and so is the child he acknowledged. He probably never thought that far as a parent. Well, I knew it, but it was still a shock. You never thought about me or the kids. My ex-husband remained silent. No matter what was said, was he really unable to say anything after all this, pinned under the gaze of the three of us? My ex-husband didn't even try to make excuses, maybe due to his useless pride. I knew it, but still, what was he thinking during all those years of marriage, of family life with us? He probably thought the onslaught was over. He let out a breath, relaxing his shoulders. but he wasn't let off so easily. And on top of that, you were begging that woman for money too, weren't you? Are you just terrible? Ethan said with disgust. What? What are you talking about? Not what are you talking about? You're even messing with the company's money now. Mur's unexpected words made him freeze as he stared at her. Don't say it's a lie. I didn't do that, really. Still playing dumb? You can't escape this. What are you talking about? Where's the proof? His red-faced shout echoed in the room. Ethan doused his fire with a cool reply. You left evidence everywhere, blatantly in the company's books. His face was drained of color. The financial audit of your company is being handled by my husband, Mur added. My ex-husband lost all expression, probably never imagining the man he thought he'd congratulate today as Mur's husband was the one exposing his embezzlement. I was shocked when I heard it too. Mur's husband, a certified public accountant, was involved in auditing my ex-husband's company. The chief accountant, who happened to know me's husband's firm manager, brought up recent suspicious financial activities leading to his involvement. The more we looked, the stranger it got. Did you really have to embezzle $1 million for your debts and secret child support? Mur's words hit him hard. He must have been overwhelmed with why and how could this happen. Ethan mercilessly delivered the final blow. You know, this is a crime. My ex-husband froze completely. His body trembled slightly as we watched him. Mur said, That's why I wanted to end it. What? I'm married now, connected to another family. I don't need a criminal in my family, and I wanted to reset everything I've been carrying all these years. That's why I asked Mom to prepare this room today. Why can't she arrange this room? This is a wedding venue, right? He turned his gaze towards me. I spoke without meeting his eyes. This place, it's my company. What? Your company? I started in this industry as a part-timer, and after gradually gaining experience, I was promoted. From there, I worked hard to learn and build connections. I entered this industry before we divorced, a little before he started ignoring me. He never knew or cared to know what company I worked for or what I did. He didn't even try to find out. So he never knew I've been in this industry since then. It was a terrible situation, but it led to good connections for me. And 2 years ago, I started this company with someone I've worked with for a long time. Who? Someone you've worked with, the president of the parent company, and now my husband. What? He was speechless. As expected, I guess. So he always thought he was above his ex-wife, who is now a president's wife and a subsidiary company president, shaking. He managed to ask us, me, is what Mur is saying true? What? When we divorced, you cut ties with her, right? That's right, isn't it? He shouted desperately, but cold words rained down on him. Isn't that obvious? Like I said earlier, I ignored Mom on the surface for 7 years just to protect her. It was only superficial. I never really ignored her. Besides, you were hardly ever home. What? You only saw what was on the surface, right? Whether I was ignoring Mom or not, well, that's... And when I graduated from college, you too got divorced. That's when I made my choice, right? To go with Mom. That's a lie, right? It's true. Someone like you, a cheating, abusive, embezzling jerk, just disgusts me. You have no idea how much those 7 years messed with my mental health. Mur's voice, which had been so strong, started to tremble, her eyes filling with tears. Murray, I'm so sorry. I couldn't help but hug her. It's okay. Mom was always there, silently protecting us from any harm, taking on everything, standing strong in place of a deadbeat dad who wouldn't contribute or even come home. Mur hugged me back, her arms trembling, sobs echoing against my back. Ethan gently rubbed our shoulders, saying, Anyway, Dad, you're busted. What? Actually, I'm involved in that audit too. What? I'm a certified public accountant now, working under Mur's husband. You mean you're with her husband's firm? Yep, so I know all about your dirty deeds. I've been looking back, and it's been going on for quite a while, hasn't it? It's more than just $1 million, right? What? Really? Well, what you spend it on isn't my concern. But the fact you used someone else's money doesn't change. My ex-husband fell silent at that. I pulled out my phone and quickly sent a message to my husband. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Several men approached my ex-husband in silence. As he responded, what must he be thinking? He hesitantly put out his handcuffed wrists. I averted my gaze. The soft click of the handcuffs echoed. Since then, my ex-husband has been cooperating with the police investigation. During this, they discovered he had been abusing the child he had with his mistress. Of course, he was rearrested, and the mistress too. The child, still in middle school, is now in a child protective facility. The police informed me. Hearing this, Ethan had an indescribable look on his face. Something wrong. Well, Mom might not like it, but I want to meet that kid. What? I knew Ethan often saw those three at his part-time job. I thought it might be a sentiment. But he said, if I had noticed something back then, maybe that kid wouldn't have been hurt. Ethan seemed to feel responsible for what had happened. Also, yeah, you may not like it, but he's technically my brother, right? Ethan said, looking away. Perhaps since that time 10 years ago, he had felt a vague sense of brotherhood towards the little boy. Indeed, he's all alone now. Yeah, honestly, I didn't feel great about it. That child was the result of betrayal, but he's alive and growing. I've made my kids go through unnecessary hardships. Part of that responsibility is undeniably mine. So let's do what I can now. Shall we go meet him sometime? Ethan's face lit up with a smile. How the boy would react or receive this, I don't know. But I want to see the smiles of the children around me as much as possible. I gently stroked Ethan's head. To move forward, I'll ask someone who knows. I took out my phone, opened my history, tapped the name of someone important, and listened to the dial tone.
Here I am, catering to your needs as well, despite your uninvited presence. A little gratitude wouldn't hurt, I muttered under my breath, trying to keep my composure. The water here is exquisite, isn't it? I remarked, trying to lighten the mood with a subtle compliment, though it felt futile in the midst of the tension. Here I am, sitting in this upscale establishment where I'm supposedly welcomed, left with nothing but a solitary glass of water, while the rest of the family indulges. My mother-in-law's cutting words sliced through the air once again, leaving me speechless. My name's Chloe. Fresh out of college, I dove headfirst into the corporate world, dedicating myself to sales ever since. Despite my achievements, my parents incessantly badger me about settling down. Succumbing to their persistent pleas, I reluctantly signed up for a matchmaking service at the age of 37. I married Ricky, who happens to be 5 years my junior, thinking it would ease my parents' worries. Little did I know, a sudden trial awaited us. Ricky's company folded amid an economic slump. Thankfully, between our combined incomes and my prudent savings, we managed to weather the storm. I encouraged Ricky to take on the role of homemaker temporarily until he secured another job. Admittedly, his domestic skills leave much to be desired, but having someone manage the household while I support us financially is a relief. Despite my extra effort and overtime to enhance sales materials and earn performance bonuses, months passed with no sign of Ricky's willingness to re-enter the workforce. When I suggested he consider part-time work, Ricky brushed it off, deeming it unsuitable for his future aspirations. As time wears on, Ricky grows increasingly agitated whenever I broach the subject of his job search. While he may appear unperturbed, still receiving unemployment benefits, his prolonged unemployment leaves me on edge. Eventually, Ricky begins to make demands for money, hinting that his savings from his bachelor days have evaporated. Though I never knew the extent of his savings, his post-marriage spending habits seemed extravagant. Whether it was splurging on home gym equipment or indulging in the latest video games, it's evident that he wasn't prudent with his finances. Now, with his unemployment benefits exhausted, the financial burden falls squarely on my shoulders. In exchange for Ricky handling household chores, I've taken on the responsibility of covering most expenses, from rent and utilities to groceries and daily essentials, solely from my paycheck. However, I'm stretched thin, unable to provide any more financial support. Despite this, Ricky argues, I don't have a single dollar to my name. Can't you throw in a bonus every now and then? Ricky's request pushes me to my limit, and I retort sharply, I don't have an allowance either, and I simply can't afford to give more. I understand the urgency of finding a full-time job, but even a part-time job would suffice for now. We can't continue like this. Our disputes over finances have become all too common, yet they always reach a standstill. Eventually, Ricky begins receiving financial assistance from his parents, further straining my relationship with them. During a visit to his parents, my mother-in-law lectures. A wife should quietly support her husband, earn more, and allow my son his freedom. Such comments only deepen the chasm between me and Ricky's parents. One evening, Ricky surprises me with plans to dine out. Excitedly, he reveals reservations at a prestigious local restaurant, rumored to be a hidden gem. He gleefully mentions that he's booked a table for 4, including his parents. With caution, I inquire about the affordability of such a lavish restaurant. Ricky's gaze shifts momentarily before he begins to explain. To my surprise, he reveals that he had quietly taken on a part-time job. It's a brief daytime shift, and after our past disagreements about full-time employment, he struggled to find the right moment to tell me. As a gesture of apology and reconciliation, he arranged the dinner reservation at a nice restaurant. Touched by his sincerity, I accept his invitation wholeheartedly. Although I harbor numerous questions about his workplace and position, Ricky reassures me that we'll discuss it over dinner, opting to keep the details vague for the time being. Despite the lingering curiosity, the cheerful topic succeeds in lifting the weight of tension between us, if only temporarily. However, the true purpose behind the dinner becomes clear days later in a cozy private room at the restaurant, and an unexpected surge of anger grips me as I realize the reality of the situation. From the moment we set foot inside, there's an unsettling aura emanating from the restaurant staff, signaling that something is amiss. They appeared slightly taken aback by our arrival, exchanging murmurs before my mother-in-law took charge and led the way. Despite any underlying tension, I maintained a polite smile and assured them that everything was all right, urging them to proceed to our designated room. Once inside, seating arrangements were swiftly made, adhering to the family's customary positioning. I found myself, as usual, seated closest to the entrance. It seemed an unspoken tradition whether this meal was Ricky's attempt at reconciliation or not. Without protest, I took my place. As the first dish was presented, a subtle unease began to settle in the room. The waiter paused upon entering, a troubled expression flickering across his features. My mother-in-law, with an air of grace seldom seen, gestured towards my father-in-law, indicating his place first, followed by herself, then our son. I can hardly wait to see what delights await us, I remarked, a sense of relief washing over me. The waiter proceeded to serve each dish in the designated order, father-in-law, mother-in-law, Ricky, and then began to explain each course in detail. It wasn't until they reached Ricky's plate that the realization struck. My meal had yet to be served. Gathering my resolve, I waited until the waiter had finished his explanations before speaking up. "Excuse me." My plate remained conspicuously empty as I sat there, staring at the glass of water placed before me, courtesy of my mother-in-law. Before I could voice my concern, the waiter attempted to intervene, his eyes widening with apparent discomfort. However, my mother-in-law swiftly intercepted, her laughter cutting through the air as she dismissed my predicament. "Oh, Flo, you never fail to astonish with your audacity. A daughter-in-law is but a stranger to the family. Is it not enough that you intrude upon our family dinner uninvited? Now you demand a meal? Water is more than adequate for a woman as impertinent and clueless as you. Besides, this is no ordinary water. It's from a prestigious establishment. You should consider it a privilege." While I had no qualms about abstaining from food to savor the flavors later, this treatment was beyond absurd. As my mother-in-law ushered the waiter towards the exit, she added insult to injury, instructing him to charge an exorbitant $1,000 for the water. "Consider it a steal for the opportunity to drink water in such opulent surroundings," she quipped. "Take your time. We won't be hurried." Rage surged within me, bubbling up from the depths of my being. Glancing at Ricky, I hoped for some form of support, but he remained indifferent, focused solely on his meal. My father-in-law mirrored this indifference, casually sipping his drink as though nothing had happened. It dawned on me that they had orchestrated this scenario from the outset, intending to leave me with the bill. I felt utterly defeated, realizing that Ricky's promise of treating me with his part-time earnings was merely a ploy to draw me into this humiliation. In my frustration, anger seemed futile. "Fine," I relented, my voice heavy with resignation. "I'll cover the cost of the water and depart. Enjoy your family time." With that, I exited the room to settle the bill. the echoes of their coarse laughter trailing behind me into the hallway. The attentive waiter noticed my departure and offered an alternative, mentioning that although the pre-ordered meal couldn't be served, other options were available. Grateful for his consideration, I declined, insisting on only paying for the water before making my swift exit. To my surprise, the waiter informed me that the water was complimentary. With a mixture of relief and indignation, I promptly left the restaurant behind. Witnessing Ricky's behavior today was the final confirmation I needed to proceed with divorce proceedings. His prolonged unemployment, coupled with a lack of effort in job hunting, had strained our relationship to its breaking point. Instead of taking responsibility, he chose to conspire with his parents, shifting the blame onto me when the financial reality hit home. Today's ordeal of humiliation and harassment was the ultimate betrayal, extinguishing any lingering affection I had for him. It was clear that I could no longer endure this marriage. Upon returning home, I wasted no time in packing my belongings, determined to leave behind any remnants of my life with Ricky. Our once shared space now felt suffocating, overrun by his hobbies and possessions. As I reflected on our situation, I realized that my personal belongings were minimal, having prioritized saving since Ricky's business downfall cast a shadow over our finances. With a sense of purpose, I lugged my trusty suitcase from my college days, filled it with essentials, and set off for the hotel where I would spend the night, a temporary refuge as I embarked on my journey towards a fresh start. The following morning brought a newfound sense of vigor as I indulged in a hearty hotel breakfast before heading off to work. It had been an eternity since I'd relished such a meal. Typically, my breakfast consisted of nothing more than a plain slice of toast, devoid of jam or butter, due to my tight financial constraints. I marveled at the recent improvements in hotel services, appreciating the small luxuries amidst my mundane routine. En route to work, I made a brief stop at the city office to collect divorce papers from the after-hours window. Though only my portion had been filled out, an unexpected wave of optimism washed over me. With the decision to divorce now made, it became apparent that I had endured far more unhappiness in this marriage than I had initially realized. Upon arriving at the office and immersing myself in work, I couldn't help but notice a disturbance emanating from the neighboring department. As the claimer drew nearer, gradually encroaching upon our own workspace, I exchanged curious glances with a colleague seated beside me. Before long, the disruption reached our department, accompanied by a familiar voice calling out my name. "Hey Chloe, come out here. You can't just disappear because you didn't come home. Mom and Dad are willing to forgive you if you return and apologize." My heart raced as I stood up, utterly flabbergasted to see Ricky and my in-laws standing at the entrance of my office. Their hostile expressions only intensified upon locking eyes with me, and they wasted no time in making a beeline towards me. My mother-in-law thrust a receipt from the previous night's dinner into my hands. "I explicitly instructed you to pay $1,000 for that water, didn't I? You, the wife of my son, have orchestrated this deceit." Their accusations pierced through the air, disregarding the attention drawn from my colleagues. Ricky and my mother-in-law continued their tirade, their voices echoing through the office, while my father-in-law adopted his customary innocent bystander demeanor, just as he had the day before. The audacity of their actions left me speechless. It was incomprehensible that they would go to such lengths, even taking time off to confront me in my workplace. Yet no matter how forcefully they pushed, I remained resolute. If I'm deemed a stranger to your family, then why should I be held accountable for the meal? I retorted, my voice firm. I refuse to tolerate this harassment in my workplace. Should you persist in causing disruption, I will not hesitate to involve the authorities. A sudden sense of dread washed over me as I realized Ricky's intentions. Without warning, he seized a computer monitor from a nearby desk, his actions fueling my apprehension. Witnessing this escalation, my mother-in-law seized a nearby phone and declared, "We'll demonstrate the consequences of defying us," before violently slamming it onto the floor. The deafening crash reverberated through the room, triggering screams and pandemonium among the female staff, plunging the office into chaos. As panic ensued, my mother-in-law and Ricky, their faces flushed with anger, began hurling objects indiscriminately. Amidst the chaos, my father-in-law finally spoke, his tone laced with a strange detachment. If only Chloe had complied and paid as instructed, none of this would have transpired, he remarked apologetically, addressing the room. "Please accept our apologies for the inconvenience. Chloe will take care of the cleanup." His attempt at humor fell flat, his nonchalant demeanor contrasting starkly with the mayhem unfolding before us. Gradually, people began to distance themselves from him, wary of any interaction. Feeling a surge of urgency, I knew I had to intervene. Amidst the chaos, I raised my voice, imploring Ricky and his cohorts to cease their destructive rampage. Yet, attempting to reason with individuals consumed by rage felt akin to conversing with an impenetrable barrier. Frantically, I reached out to grab Ricky's arm in a bid to make him listen, but before I could even make contact, the situation took a dramatic turn. Suddenly, the room was flooded with the presence of police officers, their arrival signaling a swift end to the turmoil. It appeared that someone from the adjacent department had alerted the authorities upon witnessing the mayhem unfold. Ricky's accusatory glare pierced through the chaos, his enraged voice cutting through the cacophony. "You called the cops," he bellowed before launching a punch towards me. In an instant, 3 officers swiftly intervened, swiftly restraining him and bringing him to the ground. It was a scene straight out of a television drama as they proceeded to arrest him on the spot for assault. Later that day, a surreal convergence occurred at the police station, where the company's CEO, myself, and Ricky's parents found ourselves gathered. The company promptly filed a report detailing the property damage incurred during the chaos. Seeking legal counsel regarding the harassment and tumultuous events, I faced the challenge of substantiating certain claims, particularly regarding the incidents at the restaurant and Ricky's financial negligence. After deliberation with my lawyer, it became apparent that pursuing legal action would be arduous and uncertain. Hence, the decision was made to pursue a settlement. Negotiations became complex once Ricky secured legal representation, but eventually we reached an agreement for a divorce devoid of asset division, coupled with compensation for the emotional distress inflicted by Ricky's workplace violence. Meanwhile, the assault case concluded swiftly, culminating in compensation for the injuries I sustained within 2 months. Regarding the damages incurred by the company, all legal battle seemed futile and potentially detrimental due to the risk of negative publicity. Thus, the company opted for an out-of-court settlement, prioritizing damage control over monetary gain, ultimately agreeing to a substantial settlement sum in lieu of legal action. In the aftermath, Ricky emerged as the sole individual burdened with a criminal record, while he and his parents found themselves saddled with a substantial debt owed to both me and the company. Struggling to fulfill their financial obligations, they resorted to tapping into their retirement funds, leaving them financially destitute. In a last-ditch effort to salvage Ricky's prospects, his parents orchestrated his return home and utilized their connections to secure him a position at another company. However, this newfound opportunity proved short-lived. Unbeknownst to them, Ricky's new employer maintained business ties with my company. Upon learning of Ricky's tumultuous history, exacerbated by rumors circulating about his volatile behavior, the company's CEO swiftly took action to protect their reputation, prompting Ricky to resign from his position. With little recourse, Ricky retreated back to his familial abode, abandoning his latest employment endeavor. As word of his criminal past began to circulate within the neighborhood, it eventually reached the workplace of my in-laws, further tarnishing their reputation. Now not only associated with harassment, they found themselves branded as individuals harboring a dangerous and destructive individual who had invaded their daughter-in-law's workplace. As the story spread from colleagues to higher-ups, the repercussions were swift and severe. Both of my in-laws were terminated from their positions despite being on the cusp of retirement. Facing the grim reality of unemployment, they sought legal assistance in a bid to rectify the situation. Conversely, I opted to forgo further legal action, realizing that I no longer needed additional reports and recognizing the futility of hastening into marriage. Fortunately, the pressure from my parents to tie the knot has ceased. It's possible they harbor a sense of remorse over the incident, as they've refrained from broaching the subject altogether. While I empathize with my parents' predicament, I can't help but feel relieved by the newfound freedom from matrimonial expectations. Instead, I've redirected my focus towards making amends and contributing positively to the company I inadvertently troubled. Immersed in new projects, I find myself experiencing the most fulfilling days of my life, embracing this newfound sense of purpose and fulfillment. Greetings. I'm Alice, a 32-year-old soon-to-be mom, eagerly anticipating the arrival of my baby. Today finds my husband and me on our way to his family's house, a cozy 30-minute drive from our apartment. We make this trip regularly, usually a couple of times a month. Today's visit is prompted by the enticing news that my mother-in-law is whipping up her renowned apple pie. She's a kind soul, having endured the loss of her husband just last year. Despite the hardship, she's bounced back and is now eagerly awaiting the arrival of her grandchild. However, not everyone shares in our joy about the impending arrival of our child. One such person is my sister-in-law, Brianna. According to my mother-in-law, Brianna tied the knot 6 years before us, yet there's been no sign of her own pregnancy. Despite undergoing fertility treatments for the past 2 years, she's still without a child. The mounting pressure has left her noticeably irritable as of late. My mother-in-law had advised us to steer clear of Brianna whenever possible, so we usually timed our visits to coincide with her absence. Yet, much to her surprise, Brianna made an unexpected appearance on this particular day. "Long time no see, Alice. You've put on some weight, haven't you? You're not just lazing around at home because you're pregnant, right? You look like a seal, all round and ready to roll down a hill," she remarked sharply, catching me off guard. "Hey, sis, how can you say something like that right off the bat? She's 9 months pregnant. Of course her belly's gonna be big. You're gonna make enemies with pregnant women all over the world talking like that," my husband interjected, coming to my defense and leaving me momentarily speechless. "Oh, please, I'm just thinking about Alice, okay? It's tough if a pregnant woman gets too heavy, you know. I just want Alice to be aware of her responsibilities as a mother," she asserted. Knowing that arguing back would only escalate the situation, I held my tongue. "Thank you, sister-in-law. You're right, I'll be more mindful," I responded in a conciliatory tone, though she huffed in dissatisfaction. "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can be lazy. So start cleaning this house right now. You're lacking exercise, right? You can at least do that much," she insisted, thrusting a broom and dustpan into my hands. But after being reprimanded by both my mother-in-law and my husband for her behavior, she retreated to an upstairs room in a sulk. "I'm sorry, Alice. She just turned up unannounced. I asked her to leave." My mother-in-law apologized with a regretful expression. "It's all right, mother-in-law. I'm not bothered," I reassured her. "I'm sorry, Alice. That's just how my sister is," my husband chimed in, echoing his mother's apology. Following that, we enjoyed a pleasant time together, relishing the apple pie my mother-in-law had baked and sipping tea. We even called out to Brianna, but received no response. Despite our concerns, she never made an appearance. Little did I know that a harrowing incident was about to unfold just days later. I found myself at my in-laws' house alone, needing to speak with my mother-in-law. As I entered through the unlocked front door, I encountered Brianna in the living room. "Sister-in-law, what brings you here? I thought you had to work today," I inquired. "I wasn't feeling up to it, so I took the day off. And I must say, I'm surprised to see you here. You interrupted my cleaning last time. Now, please get back to work," she retorted, thrusting the broom and dustpan into my hands. To avoid any confrontation, I began cleaning despite feeling discomfort since early morning. As I worked, the pain in my stomach intensified. Just as I contemplated taking a break, my sister-in-law delivered a forceful kick to my abdomen, causing my water to break. The agony surged and I collapsed on the floor. "Help, someone please," I cried out in pain, fumbling for my phone to dial my mother-in-law. "The baby, in trouble?" I managed to gasp before blacking out. When consciousness returned, I found myself in a hospital bed, an IV coursing fluids into my arm, and the warmth of an electric blanket enveloping my body. "Where am I? What about my baby?" I attempted to rise, but the ache in my abdomen thwarted my efforts. To my astonishment, my once prominent belly had diminished considerably, leaving me bewildered. Summoning the nurse with the press of a button, I sought answers. The nurse arrived, explaining that my water had broken, necessitating an emergency cesarean delivery. Though my infant was premature, they assured me of the baby's stable condition within an incubator. Upon hearing the news, my mother-in-law and husband, who had hurried to the hospital, wore expressions colored with fury, mirroring my own shock. Resolving to visit my child once my strength returned, I devoted myself to rest, striving to hasten my recovery. The following day, an unexpected pair invaded my hospital room without a courteous knock. My sister-in-law, the very same who had inflicted harm upon me, along with her husband, barged in with audacious entitlement. I scowled at their brazen intrusion, a sense of foreboding settling over me as they proposed a shocking notion. "Let's settle this. We'll compensate you." Their suggestion sent a shiver down my spine, and when I declined, They launched a barrage of offensive remarks towards my weary countenance, still recovering from the cesarean procedure. Anger boiled within me as I contemplated the ordeal my daughter had endured at their hands. A settlement? Is this a joke? I won't be bought off. I'll ensure you face the consequences, I declared, inciting their wrath as they hurled insults at me. What? How dare you speak to us like that? We're offering a solution, showing mercy. Shouldn't you be grateful, Alice? Have your parents not taught you to respect your elders? Just agree quietly, my brother-in-law chimed in, aggravating the tension. Lost in our heated exchange, oblivious to our surroundings, the door suddenly swung open with a loud creak, startling us all. I've heard everything. I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no intention of settling. My husband's commanding presence, accentuated by his sturdy frame and towering stature, resonated in his deep voice. They appeared caught off guard by his sudden appearance, their confidence shaken. Ah, long time no see, Finn. It's a coincidence to meet you here. My brother-in-law attempted to feign casualness, though his tense expression betrayed him. Indeed, quite the coincidence, my husband responded evenly, his tone masking the tension in the room. I didn't expect to meet you here, and I never imagined I'd hear such words from you too. I would appreciate an explanation. We were all in the room when they said it, so there's no room for any excuses. I voiced my disbelief, feeling a mix of shock and betrayal. Hey, don't be so angry, Finn. It's not like we had ill intentions. We just feel bad for what we did to Alice. That's why we're offering money, hoping to settle this out of court, my sister-in-law explained, her voice trembling with guilt. But my husband's fury remained unabated. The one who decides whether this will be a settlement or not is Alice, not you. Besides, do you think this is a situation that can be solved with money? Alice had an emergency C-section. The baby's in an incubator. You endangered both their lives. Do you even understand that? My husband erupted, his emotions boiling over. I, too, found it impossible to forgive them simply because they offered compensation. I echo my husband's sentiments. No amount of money can rectify this. You'll face the consequences of your actions. My sister-in-law seemed to believe that throwing money at us would absolve them of their guilt. But this situation was far from simple. Thankfully, both my daughter and I, though she was in an incubator, were safe. But had there been any misstep, our situation could have been dire. It appeared my sister-in-law was completely unaware of this, a fact that likely troubled my brother-in-law as well. Reflecting on this, I realized I couldn't easily forgive them or entertain the notion of a settlement. My sister-in-law, upon hearing my stance, erupted, her voice rising. What do you mean? This is all her fault. She knew I couldn't conceive, yet she flaunted her pregnancy in front of me. Was that some sort of taunt? I was furious, and I did what I did to ensure she wouldn't dare to provoke me like that again. Now I understood why she had lashed out at me, but there was a perplexing detail that didn't add up. I hadn't crossed paths with her frequently during my pregnancy, and whenever we did meet, she promptly retreated to her room, avoiding any interaction. So how had she witnessed me rubbing my belly? That remained a mystery. Regardless, her actions couldn't be excused. Neither my husband nor I harbored any inclination to forgive her. I recognize that you may be facing difficulties, but that doesn't justify your actions towards Alice. Regardless of the circumstances, endangering lives is never justified. My husband reiterated the obvious, attempting to reason with them. However, they seemed disinterested, each avoiding eye contact and appearing eager to conclude the conversation swiftly. It was evident they sought a quick resolution. Seeing their lack of remorse, I felt my condition deteriorate. Are we done here? I have just undergone surgery and I'm feeling unwell. If you continue causing a disturbance in this room, I'll have to call the police. Arguing wasn't going to resolve anything, and conversing with them felt too draining in my current state of recovery. After my husband ushered them out, I let out a heavy sigh. We had ample evidence as my husband had recorded their conversation. My mother-in-law, too, was unable to contain her fury over her daughter's actions, which had endangered both my life and that of her grandchild. And so, we made the decision to press charges against my sister-in-law. We filed a complaint with the police. Following her arrest, negotiations commenced through legal channels. However, my sister-in-law adamantly maintained her innocence to her lawyer. I've done nothing wrong. This woman has been flaunting her pregnancy in front of me, causing me emotional distress while I struggle with infertility. She's not blameless, so she should consider settling. Initially willing to offer any sum of money, she later shifted her stance, asserting her innocence and suggesting we sweep the incident under the rug as a mutual fault. Though visibly intimidated upon encountering my husband in the hospital, she now dug in her heels, refusing to pay. Little did she know, our conversation in the hospital room had been recorded. When the evidence was presented, both their faces paled in realization. Even with such clear evidence, you still claim innocence. That won't fly, I remarked firmly, enduring their insults and refusing to entertain a settlement. In a fit of rage, my sister-in-law hurled the coffee from before her at us. Fortunately, it was cold, sparing us from burns. Their outrageous conduct and language in the office led to additional charges, compounding their troubles and necessitating higher compensation amounts. Attempting to soothe his irate wife, my brother-in-law exited the office with the assault charges against me and the current incident. The demanded compensation from my sister-in-law had escalated significantly. Upon informing my mother-in-law of the events, she expressed deep remorse, pledging, "I'm so sorry for my daughter's actions. You need not consider a settlement. I'll ensure she faces the consequences." Tears welled in her eyes as she apologized sincerely. I couldn't shake the feeling of dismay at witnessing a grown adult causing so much anguish to their own parents. My heart went out to my mother-in-law, bearing the brunt of her daughter's actions. Ultimately, my sister-in-law was ordered to pay a substantial compensation. Stunned by the sum, she bombarded me with calls, insisting we reduce it due to our shared culpability. I couldn't fathom how she could make such a plea after everything she had done. No matter how incessantly she called, our stance remained unwavering. No reduction, no settlement. Frankly, her calls became a nuisance, prompting me to request she cease. Her persistence led to me snapping at her, triggering her to lose her temper. Unbelievably, she stormed into my apartment, demanding my presence. "Hey, I know you're in there. Get out here now, coward," she shouted. As I lay on the sofa, still recovering from surgery, her relentless pounding on the door and the barrage of insults echoed through the apartment. "What in the world are you doing? Is everything all right? Your shouting is disturbing everyone. Please stop," I shouted back, though she persisted in her noisy tirade. Despite the late hour, there were elderly residents and families with young children in the building, and her disturbance was unwelcome. I couldn't help but wonder if she even considered the possibility of disturbing people who might be sleeping. With my husband still at work since my hospital discharge, I had been managing visits to my daughter while dealing with her unexpected arrival and the ensuing chaos. I was at my breaking point. "No matter how many times you come here, my stance won't change. Please refrain from visiting any more," I implored, despite my weakened state. However, my sister-in-law remained fixated on a settlement, seemingly indifferent to my concerns. "I didn't intend for things to escalate like this, you know? Your actions pushed us to this point. It's audacious of you to conceive before me. Shouldn't you have been more thoughtful and waited until after us?" she retorted defensively. It appeared that she perceived pregnancy as some sort of contest. While I don't believe pregnancy should be seen as a competition or that conceiving first is more honorable, my sister-in-law, who struggled with infertility for years, seemed to view it through that lens. Though everyone holds different values, it's never justified to inflict harm on others. I understand your frustration about not being able to conceive, but that's no excuse for causing harm to others. I can't forgive you for putting my daughter in danger. You'll be held accountable for your actions, I asserted firmly. Above all, her actions had endangered my daughter, which was unforgivable. Just then, the distant sound of sirens pierced the air. "Well, if you're banging on someone's door and shouting at this hour, it's only natural that the police would be called," I remarked coolly. "What do you mean the police are here? Open the door. You have to hide me." Despite my sister-in-law's frantic pleas, I had no intention of shielding her. As the police arrived and began their inquiries, I provided my account of the situation. Just then, my husband returned home, and I quickly briefed him on the unfolding events. Recalling previous incidents, my husband decided to divulge the full truth to the authorities. Consequently, the police escorted my sister-in-law away in their vehicle. Later that evening, my brother-in-law contacted me to announce his decision to divorce my sister-in-law and implored me not to entangle him in the matter. A rather self-serving plea. Evidently, one of my husband's colleagues had overheard my brother-in-law's conversation at the hospital where I was hospitalized. Subsequently, workplace gossip circulated among female employees, leading to a tarnished reputation for my brother-in-law. Matters escalated, and the narrative eventually reached the attention of the HR department. Faced with the inevitable consequences, my brother-in-law opted for transparency, confessing to his misdeeds. Consequently, he was informed that he could no longer remain employed in the company and would be transferred to a regional office. Though he doesn't want to be dragged into any more trouble, I simply can't handle her problems anymore. Another slip up and I'll lose my job. Please spare me from any more complications, he asserted before abruptly ending the call. Since then, he's remained silent. In the aftermath, we received a significant settlement from my sister-in-law. To ensure she couldn't intrude into our lives again, we changed our phone numbers and relocated. Even if she were to face dire circumstances and seek assistance, she'd have no means of locating us. Several months later, my daughter was discharged from the hospital unscathed, thriving, and healthy. Rumors circulated that my sister-in-law hadn't fared much better. Initially relying on the hospitality of friends, she overstayed her welcome, neglecting her shared expenses until she was ultimately evicted. Now, with nowhere to call home and debts looming, she's scraping by with part-time work.